Hey everyone, it's Miss Vinian, your neighborhood avid lady, here to talk about focus note taking. So when we do focus notes, you always want to have an essential question. So if you want to go ahead and set up your paper to take notes along with me, you're going to need an essential question. And our essential question today is, how can I take more efficient and meaningful notes in class? So focus note taking is based on the levels of learning. So this is our COSTAS levels of learning. So they're critical to understanding the note taking process. The focus note taking process follows the levels of learning. So the lowest level of learning is here, gathering, okay? And that is where a lot of students will take notes. We want to make sure that we're also processing and applying our notes as well. So if you only ever get to the gathering phase, students are not learning as much as they need to. They're not effectively taking those notes and doing something with them. So that is our highest level of learning between the processing and applying phases. Before we start taking notes, pick a type of note style you would like to use today. 2-column notes, 3-column notes, Cornell notes. Honestly, any type of notes that you want to use is good for note taking. It could be a graphic organizer, it could be a mind map, it could literally be whatever you want. The most important thing is that you take notes. Doesn't really matter how you do it. Here's some examples from a previous focus note taking seminar. There's a mind map. We have 2-column notes, we have Cornell notes, and a mind map. Alright, so essential question, back to it. How can I take more efficient and meaningful notes in class? If you haven't already done it, you may want to write it down. Here are the 5 steps of the focus note taking process. It's really, really important to understand that this is a process. It's not just a style of notes, it's a process. So we're going to start with step 1, taking notes. Taking notes. First, you're going to establish a purpose and objective for note-taking. You're going to have your students write down an essential question to guide their note-taking. If you don't have an essential question, feel free to make an essential question or use your objective or standard. Select the best format for the notes. So as teachers, we probably know what's best for what types of notes are best for our lesson. I try to give my students free rein, but sometimes they need to do a 3-column notes, or sometimes they need to do a Venn diagram. So if there is a format that you want them to use, please let them know, or allow them to choose. Write notes based on your sources. The most important word here is paraphrase. Have them select paraphrase and arrange the information thoughtfully. Making sure that your students are not copying off the board is really important because it helps them process. Please help them in this processing by underlining what's most important and asking them how they would paraphrase the slide. Here's some examples of note-taking formats that you can use to encourage your students. Please remember, not all students learn alike, so letting them have a choice is going to help them be more invested in your class. Alright, so the taking notes part of focus note-taking addresses the gathering part of the levels of learning. A lot of people stop there, so we want to make sure that we build on those levels of learning for our students. Processing notes comes next. This involves thinking about your notes. It should be done within 24 hours of taking the notes. It provides opportunities for collaboration, and it's sometimes messy. This also focuses on clarifying content and organization. What processing notes looks like is revising notes, and my students don't really use the word processing, we use the word annotate. So underlining, highlighting, circling, this is where they go back and they make meaning of their notes. Students can also identify main and supporting ideas by selecting, sorting, classifying, and organizing. So if you're into Cornell notes, this would be when students go back and they chunk. If you have a mind map, this is where you would make connections. If students are doing a 2-column chart, they might be drawing arrows or highlighting. So processing notes is a great opportunity for students to collaborate. You can have students do note check and look at each other and see if they missed anything. And it's not copying if you're checking notes with somebody. All right, so the step 2, the processing part of focus notes, addresses the processing part. Okay, so we're moving on up the levels of learning. All right, so another good tactic for taking notes is when you're lecturing or you're doing some kind of intense activity, have them get the input, so like the direct instruction for 10 minutes, have them take 2 minutes to look over their notes and add to them, and then have them discuss as a table. This helps break up and helps them understand the notes. If you lecture for an hour, students are not going to remember any of that, and they're not going to be able to make meaning of their notes. So less is more in this situation. Try to do the input for 10, silent minute 2, and then a discussion. Connecting thinking comes next. This is where you're going to think beyond the notes. If you've done Cornell Notes before, this is where students will ask questions. So students can do one of two things: ask questions about the notes or add original thinking to their notes. Asking questions can be wonderment questions, like I wonder how this connects, or I wonder, like a question they might ask the teacher. They could be a test question that's answered in the notes. It could be any kind of application, or they can add original thinking, what they already knew about this, content from the course, connect it back to an earlier learning target. I have my students typically, my AVID students do this 2 or 3 times per notes. This helps them to return to their notes with an eye for inquiry, and it helps them make sense of what they already know or what they've already experienced. They should ask questions that they want to find the answers to and that they want to discuss. Make sure that you make time for this connecting thinking portion. A lot of times students will not do this on their own, and this is a difficult part for them. So this would be great for inquiry and for group discussion. All right, guys, what kinds of questions can we ask ourselves about these notes? Let's write them down around the notes. Or if you have notes for homework, you can have students ask 2 questions on the notes and bring those questions to class the next day. Step 4 is summarizing and reflecting on learning. So, thinking about the notes as a whole. Summarizing and reflecting are 2 different things. Summarizing is really good for direct instruction content, and reflection is good for application activities. So summarizing, the easiest thing you can have your students do is answer the essential question. That's why you gave it, or answer the learning target. And they do that using the most important aspects of their notes. So, for example, if the essential question is, how do small actions create larger consequences, and I'm teaching about the Gilded Age, my students might talk about how some small things that happened in the Gilded Age led to bigger impacts and essential understandings. Reflecting, how will this be useful? Consider how the learning helps you meet the note-taking objective. Plan where you go from here. So this one is good for if you're doing a science or math type class, if you're trying to connect there, or it's really just good for an application activity. All right, the last step, well, before we go to the last step, the Costas levels of learning, that is going to be the highest level of learning. We're moving on up still. And connecting and summarizing focus notes address the applying and some of the processing parts. All right, and the last thing that you're going to do with these notes is really what you wanted to do the whole time. Use the notes for their intended purpose. Demonstrate what you've learned or apply it to a new situation. This is where you get to do all the fun stuff you want to do in teaching. Socratic seminar, philosophical chairs, debates, arguments, narratives, presentations, project-based learning, quizzes, tests, scripts, documentaries. Okay, students can't do these things if you have not given them any backgrounds, right? So you're definitely going to have to help them with note-taking, and giving them 25 pages of notes and then a quiz is not really a great way for students to learn, okay? Giving them a page, having them do the processing, the connecting, the summarizing, and then applying it is going to teach them a whole lot more than 25 pages of notes would ever do. Here's an example of applying. We use at the school a 1-pager, so this is an application of focused note-taking. Here's another one. So it's always great to have their students like they could take their notes and apply them to this 1-pager. And I can send that rubric out for you guys. Here's an example of some Cornell notes, which seem to be popular. And the application part is obviously the highest level of learning. So, a couple things. Focus notes are a process. You can literally do it to anything. Graphical organizers, readings, worksheets. I'll have students all the time say, but I don't even have any notes. And that's when you say anything that you give your students, anything a teacher gives you is notes. That means that they've already done the format for you. All you have to do is annotate or process or do a summary, okay? Also, you have to take your notes home. You have to let your students take their notes home. If you keep them in the classroom, you are not helping them in any way at all. They can't study, they can't process, and you're not teaching them responsibility. Always have an essential question, and don't be offended if the students ask, what's the purpose of these notes? That means you have a good learner on your hands. And you have to give time in class. So make sure that you give time in class to do these. You can incorporate it into your lesson, and it's going to help add inquiry to your lesson. All right, so here are the 5 steps one more time. And before we go, I wanted to show you, I'm going to show you a video of the process. Okay, so here's a video of, you guys see the EQ up here. Student is taking notes in whatever way they want. Then they are going to go back, they're annotating, processing. They're going to go back, organize, ask questions, and complete a summary. And that is how you process your notes. So please email me if you have any questions, laura.vinion@mnps.org, or if you just need some more help. There's going to be another focused note-taking session in October. So we hope to see you there. Thank you.